Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, dear friends, dear ETN members, dear guests. Welcome to what is the 7th episode already of Innovation Circle. I'm very excited to be listening and participating to the discussion on investments for transformation today. We have two guest speakers, Roberta Benedetti, who is a sustainability-focused investor and co-chair of the Global Investors Panel of Deep Transitions, and Professor Johan Schot, who is a professor of global history and sustainability transitions at Utrecht University and also academic director at TIPC and coordinator of the Deep Transitions Research Project. They will both share insights on how innovative financing can lead to systemic changes for sustainable development from two perspectives, that of an investor and that of an academic. So very excited to have this dual perspective on this important topic. It's a topic that we see at the heart of functioning innovation ecosystems, not least to transform ideas from concepts into marketable products or services. So it's a topic that we will explore further in the next weeks and months. Very excited to make a start today. Also very excited because today, for the first time, we have a moderator who is not UNECE staff. And so we're very happy to see this trend now of transferring the stewardship of ETN responsibilities and other tasks to our members. We have Vicky, who is moderating today. I'm sure you all know her, Victoria Shaw. She's the program director of TIPC, and she will take us through this exciting episode today. Vicky, over to you. I'll let you run the show today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the warm welcome into your room in Geneva, and also to the network. It's really good to see some old friends and some new faces here today. So we're here today to learn about transformative investment. And I just want to launch right in. We've got Roberta and Johan here. And I want to start by asking, perhaps with Roberta, first of all, the network's diverse. There's lots of different people involved from different backgrounds. So can you tell us a little bit about what is transformative investment and the Deep Transitions Lab, and how did you get involved with it? I might need to ask you to
yes,
just... yeah.
I was on mute. Thank you, Victoria, and hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Sure, it's a pleasure to dive into this topic. I actually got involved first in 2021 as part of Generation Investment Management. I'm an investor by background. I've been an investor there for a long time. And Generation, as a leader in sustainability, was summoned among a group of other sustainability focused investors to explore with the Deep Transitions thinkings and framework, and in particular to join the Deep Transition Futures Investors Panel. It really was the first time that I think the Deep Transitions theories and frameworks were tested with real practitioners, and really our reactions gathered, our feedback collected, and then evolved into what then became the transformative investment philosophy that really gathers a lot of the work done with the panel. So it's been an incredible journey since, and I've become more and more involved with it since then. And with the launch of the lab, decided to become part of the team to take this forward to other investors and continue to develop tools and practices.
Thank you. And you mentioned deep transitions. I'm conscious that a lot of the people listening won't be aware of what that is or know what that is. So maybe I can turn to Johan. Can you say very briefly and in a way that the layperson can understand, what do we mean by deep transition?
Okay, that's I'm glad to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me. That's a deep question. The deep transition idea is that, first of all, that to solve the global challenges, climate change, biodiversity, inequality, poverty, we need system change. So that's the first idea. And we need not the change of one system, but of multiple systems. So we need to change the mobility system, the energy system, the food system, because they're all connected. If you just change mobility system without changing the energy system, it doesn't work, it doesn't help. Then the second observation is that these systems we have in place in our current societies have been built up and developed over the last 200 years. So there's a long-term historical perspective, and we call that the first deep transition. You know, it's always, you can also call it the Industrial Revolution. In any case, we have built up in our societies a material infrastructure which is causing all these global challenges, and we need to change them. So this is a deep change of the way our economy works and our society works, which goes beyond what we call system optimization. To make it very concrete, for example, precision agriculture, as an example, you can use less pesticides, you know, become more focused on precisely using the right amount, using digital tools for that. But you still have a food system which makes use of pesticides, and in many ways is still a similar system. So you need to move to a new type of agriculture, regenerative agriculture, you know, organic food system to solve the issues. So deep transition thinking is about how can we move to new systems, to the development and implementation of new systems.
And obviously I'm here from the TIPC perspective, the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, but the Deep Transitions Lab is focused on transformative investment. So why did you see the need, perhaps starting with Johan, then move a little bit to Roberta for your reflection, but why did you see the need for transformative investment? What's wrong with the current system around investment?
Okay, well, what's wrong is that it's very clear that the new systems that need to be put in place, there's not enough investment for them. For example, now we see that the renewable revolution is happening, so a lot of investment is going into renewables, but in a way it's also too late. This should have happened earlier, and that's one of the problems. But if you look at the food system, the more radical food solutions, for example, in the Netherlands, we have a whole discussion about the future of agriculture. And, you know, there's a lot of debate and riots in the street, but there's not enough money there's not enough investment for farmers to make this transition to a complete new way of farming. So we need investment, but we also need investment focused on transformation, because a lot of investment is focused on returns, risk avoidance, and has a limited sense of impact. And the impact that is measured is well, what we would call system optimization. So we need investment practice that really values system change and is willing and able to invest in that. And part of our message is that there will also be returns. It's not like there will be no returns in that case. That's not our argument. But it does need kind of extra steps to do that, which goes beyond the current investment practice.
Thank you. And for your perspective, Roberta, as a sustainability investor, did you see a similar picture? Did you see similar problems?
Yeah, I think the problem is indeed as Johan described. So the reality is that certainly too little, but an increasing amount of money is increasingly flowing towards, let's call it sustainability or ESG or impacts of various shades or grades of alignment to sustainability and desire to make an impact. The problem is from there, we're not seeing any of the indicators of our global challenges actually improving. In fact, they're all getting worse. And there is really no link between what investors are doing and how the world is changing. And the key reason for that is that investors, even those with the most positive impact approach, actually don't know how they are contributing to changing a system or to not changing and entrenching a system. So by focusing on single or in any ways limited impact metrics or ESG, even ESG metrics, they actually completely take the focus away from what is happening on a broader level at system scale. And this is not an answer that's easy to get to, because obviously systems are complex, they're dynamic, the connections between different parts are always moving and they're very counterintuitive. So we need tools, we need frameworks to try and understand how does one investment contribute to system change or to a certain vision of a system going forward, to a desirable future going forward. And whether it's indeed accelerating system change or by optimizing an existing system and entrenching it, is actually slowing down, hindering system change. So that is very critical, because investors that may be hoping, truly trying to do good, may end up actually potentially doing the opposite, or at least, taking the focus away from what needs to be done. But if we don't have the tools to demonstrate or even to define what is systems change, it's very hard to get there. It's very hard to move forward in this debate.
Thank you. And you mentioned that need then for tools and frameworks. So, and this lies behind the idea of the Deep Transitions Lab. So what makes that, perhaps starting with Roberta, what makes this a different approach then? What makes the Deep Transitions Lab different?
Yeah, first of all, the main difference that I've seen from any other initiative is a truly collaborative co-creation exercise where academics and investors come together, open-minded, with no agenda, but really trying to learn from each other and to contribute to the creation of further knowledge in figuring out how to advance this space. This is very transformative per se, because investors and researchers are not really used to collaborate that closely in investments. There's obviously ways in which investors use research or commit research for very narrow focused topics, but not in this way to actually open up their own practices, open up their house, their kimono, to show what we're doing. This is how we're trying to do good. Is that actually working, or is that actually not? So this is a very honest conversation, collaboration. At times it becomes uncomfortable because it's very deep. But I think the process is innovative per se, and it's what gets to the learning. So the process entails experiments where investors, which are partners of the lab, and researchers, which are part of the lab team, collaborate in co-creating knowledge. So an experiment is a structured knowledge creation exercise. We have some archetypes of experiments, and we look at different parts of the investment process, and we tailor that to whichever sector, stage, equity, debt, capital structure, etc. Risk and commercial return orientation of the partner. So it's about the process, it's not about the content per se.
Thank you. So this notion of experimentation then is really key. So can I ask you, Johan, to open up, why is experimentation so important for transformative change in particular?
Well, let me first talk about this as a researcher, because in the land of research, so what is valued is, of course, theory, and there's certain kind of criteria about what is good theory, and empirical validity. So we test our theories, we try them out, we see whether they work, whether they promote understanding. What for me is very important as the quality sign of research is actionable. So whether research is actionable. So experiments are part of the research process. Because I'm an academic in the lab. I'm not a consultant, so I'm executing my research by working with partners who have knowledge which is relevant to my research process, and they can challenge me and, discuss my assumptions. So one thing that the experiments represent is a research methodology of transdisciplinary research. The other aspect of it is that an experiment is a learning process for investors, because these investors, they have a certain way of working in their investment process. And what we do is to some extent radically different. And we want to expose them to it, and and they have to try out and see what works, because we don't have the answers. We together try to develop and learn about how to produce new type of answers to the question how to invest. So these experiments are learning processes, and we document them as learning processes, and we try to learn from them and use them to build capacities and capabilities within the investment world.
So just to unpack that a bit, so in terms of who would be involved in the experiments, can you explain who would be the investors involved? What type of people would be involved, and what would they be doing with the methodology? Okay, so for example, we have that's the good investors. They are part of the lab. They invest in the food system. They invest in a number of companies. So we have people from their research team, so people in the firm who are involved in answering the question, what is the impact of this firm? Because these good investors want to have positive impact. They are impact investors. So they have research analysts in-house. And then they have investors, so people in the end who make investment decisions. We invest in this, but not in that. They often also engaging with the actors, with the companies they invest in. So we have like 5-6 people, investors and 2 researchers, and then we go with them through a structured process. So the first part of the process is looking at the current state of the art in the world. So how would we describe the current food system? So we use our methodologies to make a description of the current food system, and we see whether we can align how they would describe it, how we would describe it. And then we move to the future. We say, okay, what is the food system in 2015 that we would like to see in system terms? So how would it look like in system terms? And then we work towards pathways. We see, okay, how can we get there? So we construct together a number of pathways, again, using certain methodologies, and then we locate their investment within these pathways. So normally what the company does is they look at the company and look at the impact. So they go inward, outwards, from the company to the impact. What we do, we go to the impact and we go backward. We end up with what is invested by the company, but we also locate new opportunities and things that need to happen that at the currently are non-investable, but need to become investable in order to enable transition pathways. So it's a structured process of interactions which works with briefings. So we produce briefings they need to read. We also produce assignments they need to do. So before the experiments start, the investors really need to commit time. And that is a hurdle, because they need to invest, let's say, 8 hours a month, sometimes more, to work with us. So we are not consultants, as we always say, we are collaborators. And then we go through this structured process, and in this process they acquire new ways of looking at the world, new ways of looking at impact. They inform our research, and they identify new opportunities for capital allocation and also for engagement with firms. Okay, and I understand that one of those examples of new ways of looking at the world are the transformative investment principles, which I think, Roberta, you were very involved in developing in your role as co-chair of the Deep Transitions panel. Would you like to say a little bit about how those principles emerged and how they're being addressed through the experimentation that's happening now in the Deep Transitions lab?
Sure, happy to. So yes, the 12 principles of the transformative investment philosophy, which are available online on our website, transformativeinvestments.net, in the investment philosophy document. These came together as a result of the panel process on the Deep Transitions Futures project. Really, it came from trying to merge all of the knowledge from the theories of the deep transitions frameworks with what are the different steps that an investor takes when looking at an investment. So we started from, if we take a step back, what does an investor want to do? First of all, it's about setting goals for an investment strategy or an investment firm. So we looked at, we identified 3 principles around goal setting. First is focus on transforming the system, so having that as an objective to start with. Then it's about thinking long term, because system change cannot be achieved by thinking in the short term. And then it's about including and giving voice, because this is the fair approach when we think such big scale about changing system. Then from goal setting, we move to actually designing investment strategies. So investment strategies in terms of a new fund, for example, what is it that strategy wants to achieve? So first step would be visualizing desirable futures. This is not something that not everyone does as an investor, or indeed is quite rare, but we think it's quite important, as Johan mentioned in the experiment as well, to start from a visualization of a future scenario that's internally consistent with its own meta rules and outcomes. Then thinking about portfolio synergies, again, something not typically considered by investors. Investors tend to look at single investments one by one, and the portfolio comes together as a combination of whatever investments made sense at the time, but actually looking at synergies among portfolio companies and how they together contribute to bringing a cohesive future that's innovative and important. And then embracing uncertainty, because transformation does require comfort with just the unknown. So that is, you know, in investing, there's always an unknown, but here it's not a linear type of change that we tend to envisage. And so that requires a bit of a shift in perspective. Then from investment strategy to the investment process itself. And here again, we looked at a number of things, and these are also quite different from what investors are used to doing. The first is to think about and contextualize investments in transition dynamics. And here is where I remember the first time that I saw the transformative outcomes from Johan and the team. I needed to take a breath for a minute, because I thought, well, this is not like anything we look at when investing. But actually it does make a lot of sense to contextualize an investment into a transition dynamic, in the sense of, are we contributing to building a niche? Are we scaling that niche? Are we connecting that niche to another niche in another sector? Are we shielding it? Or are we actually investing in big companies, but we are breaking down their existing way of doing businesses and so opening them up to change, etc. This is completely new mindset, new context, new words for investors, but very important. Then we look at the example of opening up and not locking in, which in a sense I consider a little bit of a shortcut to trying to understand if we're going in the right direction, in the wrong direction in terms of system change or system optimization. And then the third is about being a world builder. This again requires massive stepping out of the comfort zone for investor, because it's about collaborating with others, and others can be other investors with different risk reward appetite, or it can be other players altogether, can be policymakers, can be local authorities, can be businesses, can be citizens, and just trying to be a world builder by putting together complementary action and multiple actions that all together will be much stronger in accelerating system change. And then from the investment process itself, the last category is about sharing and learning, because we recognize, and that's the reason itself for setting up a lab, we recognize that this field is emerging. We have a lot to learn. We are experimenting. So we need to learn from each other. We need to share practices. We need to share mistakes and as well as findings. So this is all about sort of sharing, learning, fostering interdisciplinary research among different fields, and just keeping experimenting. So this is a very quick excursus across the 12 investment principles. then depending on where we work on experiments, we focus on one or the other more. Do you want me to go into depth on some of those, or?
Well, I was interested because I noticed that you became animated talking about transformative outcomes. And and some of the language that you use might be less familiar to some of the people listening to the podcast from across the network. But this is, I mean, perhaps a way to explain it is, how do we know that some change is happening? So we have this concept of transformative outcomes, which is used in the Deep Transitions Lab and in TIPC. But maybe I can challenge Johan in just a couple of minutes. Are you able to summarize to somebody who doesn't know about sustainability transitions theory what we mean by transformative outcomes?
Oh, the first thing to understand is the rationale behind it, because when we say impact, we can talk about CO2 reduction, or we can talk about how many people are lifted out of poverty. And this is often used by investors. They say, okay, we contributed to this amount of CO2 reduction, for example. What we say is it's important to contribute to system change. And we need to measure, because if you change the system, you will get CO2 reduction. But not only CO2 reduction, you will also be able to deal with some of the other challenges, because we don't want to focus just on the climate, for example, but also on the trade-offs between the various aspects of impacts. So we look at system dynamics, and we try to assess whether an investment influences the system dynamics. And we call that transformative outcomes. For example, how does it influence the networking? Because there are certain type of networks conducive to system change and others not. If you in a network have only the pharmaceutical industry and you want to change the medical system, the healthcare system, well, you will fail. It's not serious in a way, because you need other actors. So the quality of the network is really important. You can also look at, for example, circulation, which is also an important outcome. The question is whether the knowledge produced or the change is kept small or kept in one firm, or whether it is circulating and mobilizing others. If others are mobilized, I think the transformative outcome is higher. So we look at transition dynamics in order to get to CO2 reduction, people lifted out of poverty. So these outcomes are indicators of system change.
So the transformative outcomes are tools. They're not very fixed measures then of change.
We have tools to look at them, to measure them, but they are social processes necessary to get to system change. And they come from academic research. Let me say they're rooted. We have done a lot of case study work. They are rooted in 25, 30 years of research of a field called sustainability transitions. So they are, well, to a large extent, evidence-based. But of course, we are further refining and developing them, and that's part of our research agenda.
And I think there's so much to talk about with transformative outcomes, because as you mentioned, 12 to begin with, and potentially developing further. But I'm conscious that we haven't got that much time today, and I really want to ask you a bit about the process of working with this theory in practice and how that's been for you personally on this journey together with investors and researchers. Perhaps, Roberta, could you say a little bit about what's been challenging and what have you learned along the way?
Sure. In terms of what's been challenging, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the body of research is relatively deep. Well, it's very deep, but even the amount that you need in terms of time investment to understand and to manage these concepts is quite high. And so there's an investment required in becoming familiar with these concepts, after which it does make a lot of sense. I think the other challenge is the fact that they really shed a light on what you can do as an investor and how much to actually move further in terms of accelerating system change. You actually need to really go beyond the boundaries of, whether it's fixed asset classes or, the risk limitations that certain investors have, or the boundaries of collaborating with other type of investor or actors to really meaningfully make a difference. So I think they really push you to think a bit more creatively about investing, and the investment world is not a field that is typically creative or changing very fast. It's more about doing traditional things again, and in very structured and fixed ways. So I think actually seeing that really sheds the light on the need for that. On the other hand, I think there's been also some very positive example of for example, designing transformative theory of changes for new funds. And in this case, it really led to doubling down on certain strategy and really actually uncovering new opportunities for investments that were adjacent to some of the areas they were looking at, but they hadn't necessarily thought about, or again, the complementary actions may be done with others, like investing in policy change or education, actually enable the opening up of all other opportunity sets. So that was a very broadening of the space and of the opportunity set and the potential outcomes for these funds. I think it also helps really make it clear in terms of one's personally impact strategy, even if it's about systems change, but how is the journey to having impact, designing a transformative theory of change and then going forward in the process of then measuring the transformative outcomes, etc., really makes it clear, and it gives that aha moments of, okay, now I see this is my North Star, this is where I'm going, these are my assumptions, and this is why I think what I'm doing contributes to actually making a difference to getting there and accelerating there, and also having a clear vision of where, what is this future I'm envisioning, and why is it desirable?
Well, so I mean, in terms of working with the concepts then, and maybe Johan, you might like to say a little bit about this. So what have been the tensions? Are there any elements where this approach actually conflicts with existing practices and causes problems for investors?
Yes. Well, the first tension already alluded to is the time, because investors are not used to work with external researchers in the investment process, and certainly not researchers who challenge them as a kind of principle way of working. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, of course, that investors, are also they're under pressure, for performance. And we need to prove the added value of what we do in a relatively short time period, because they can be a bit impatient. What is the added value? Well, we say it takes time to see that. No, okay. You see, so there's the tension about the short term and the kind of long term, because this is a building up of capabilities and capacities, and that takes time. But there's also pressures on the academic side. Let me also say that, because the type of research we do is not always understood on the academic side. They say, okay, this is consultancy. They mean not relevant research. And then it's also difficult to get funding for that type of research, from an academic perspective, because if this is reviewed by kind of traditional reviewers, they will not value that. So we work in a space in between, an in-between space of the practice of investors and the practice in academia, and there are challenges on both sides. So we try to carve out a space to work together, but we need to protect that space, basically, and because it does need time to develop a new practice, and we don't have all the answers to what is the added value. Okay, we need to try out. Of course, there need to be a basis, but that can be challenging.
And I think that's such a nice way to finish, really, by talking about it as a protective space. We need those in order to cultivate these alternative practices. I know that there will be some questions, so I just want to take a little bit of time before, because we're going to have a game as well later in the session. But I just want to pause for a second and see whether anyone has any questions now about what we've been talking about so far. It looks like Len, you have your hand up. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vicky, and thanks, Johan and Roberta, for a very interesting talk. I'm going to go back to the topic of diffusing the learning outside of the immediate context of the experiment. So, Roberta, I picked up, and this is quite understandable, it takes a long time to understand the concepts behind this stuff, particularly if you're coming at it from, if you're not an academic, you're coming at it from outside that world. So that's understood. But Johan, you also mentioned that the investors are under time pressure. They need to deliver. They don't really have time, I would guess, to understand these concepts. So what do you think works, or what have you seen that has worked in terms of diffusing that knowledge outside of the immediate context of people who understand the concepts? Thanks.
Roberta, do you want to answer that then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's one of of our challenges. I think we're trying with things like writing an investment philosophy itself, which summarizes to the extent possible the key concepts and picks the one that are most relevant to investors and more actionable. I think some of the objectives of the labs, and the outputs of the lab, indeed will also be that of creating tools that then make it a little easier for investors to understand, notwithstanding the fact that there needs to be a basic understanding of the transformative principles and the transformative outcomes and the processes for system change. I think concept like system change versus system optimization is a little bit of a shortcut, and with making examples very clear. So Johan mentioned precision agriculture. I could think of plastics recycling as another investor. I think these make it very clear and stick as an image in terms of the pros and cons. But otherwise, I don't know that there are ways to really summarize and shorten the process. I mean, we focus on working with leaders in the space, with those who really care and maybe have themselves an an intellectual interest in system change. Very often this is family offices, high net worth individuals that have that freedom, flexibility with their own money, and not stats mandates, and at the same time may have read about system change, read books about that, and but not only, right? A lot of our partners in the lab are institutional investors, actually, and that is key for our own theory of change. We want to change the finance system, and so we want to change the relevant players, the institutional ones, the ones at scale. So it's a strong push. Yeah.
Thank you. And I can see we've got a few questions, actually. So I wonder if we can have a bit of a quick fire round of questions and answers. Stephanie, would you like to
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephanie Engelhardt. I'm co-founder of a startup. We are developing zero emission and autonomous boats and the whole ecosystem. So we are working together with investors and also with researchers. But we are developing. We are experiencing totally different. Yeah, that's different worlds. Investors and researchers. I think this is quite challenging to bring this together. How is your experience with that?
Johan, do you want to answer that very briefly? Thanks, Stephanie. Great question.
Well, one answer is the notion of experiment. So we are together, the researchers and the investors, in an experimental space, and this is exciting. And because we make very clear at the beginning what the expectations are, what is possible and not possible, and what are we trying to accomplish. And that it's new and there will be frustrations, there will be problems. So we really try to have a bit of a trust building process up front and setting expectations, because there will be rough times and we need to go through them. The other answer is to be adaptive, because what certainly happened is that we have a certain type of script of way of working, but we had to change that sometimes, really quite radical in fact, because of barriers in the process, because investors would say this is not relevant for our context. So we need to navigate. For example, we have one case now where this happened, and in response now we are kind of shadowing them in their investment process. So instead of trying to come with answers, we first try to much better understand what they are doing in the investment process and see how we can enrich that. So being adaptive is another answer.
Thank you very much. Let's try and squeeze out another question. Manuel?
Yes, thank you for the insights of the experimentation part of the transition process, which is really what I was interesting to hear. My question is also about the systems dynamic and the role of the experimentation. You were talking about using a protective, a safe space for experimentation. So that sounds like you're using a part of the system to experiment, some kind of an innovation-free zone. But by reading the feedbacks of that smaller system or contained safe system, you're not enabling the whole of the feedback to happen. So in a sense, the outcomes that you are observing may not be applicable to the whole of the system. That is the first thing that we should maybe reflect a little bit. A second thing is that we are just finishing a set of case studies on European regions, and they seem to be experimenting with regional innovation policy on that sense, or at least they want to go. But sometimes the experiments are stopped from the top. So political power plays a lot of big role in here. You want to experiment, but the top politicians don't let you go as far as you want. Do you feel that could happen also in your D labs?
Thank you. Can I ask Johan to respond very quickly to this question? Then Roberta, there's one in the chat, and I wonder if we could just have a very brief response to that before we move over to the game. But first, Johan, would you like to comment on Manuel's reflections?
Of course, the political power issue in a way applies more to the TIPC work, where we also do experimentation. And yes, it happened because we worked, for example, in Colombia through 3 successive governments, from Santos to Duque to Petro now. Very different, and they replace all the civil servants. So we had to rebuild completely the relationships. So yes, this is difficult. And part of the answer is we work really bottom up. So we try to embed, let's say, the work we do within universities, within civil society groups, within other groups. And so to provide continuity, despite the kind of political ruptures. About the other point, about experiments versus the whole of the system, well, we do look at this when we build transition pathways. So we try to see how small applications can lead to whole system change. And it takes a lot of, we have methodologies for that. But I recognize your point.
Thank you. And so let's finish with Roberta. Would you like to respond to the question from Ami in the chat, which is to what extent is this broadening the role of investors?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of the theory here, that we believe investors' role should be broadened, or at least that investors should collaborate with others to create more actions that are currently not happening, and therefore creating change that's beyond where money flows, and that is about also, you know, influencing business strategies, capital allocation priorities, business practices, and then creation of standards, of policy, you know, lobby, etc. So absolutely, it's definitely part of the theory of change.
Thank you. And I really want to thank you both for the whistle-stop tour of the Deep Transitions Lab. And I think there's much more available on the website online, but it's been really great to learn about some of the key principles and how they're being implemented in the session today. And thank you for some brilliant questions from the network. I'm going to hand back now to Jacob, because I think we're going to be playing a game to learn a little bit more about you to close this podcast.
We are indeed. So we call this the game segment. It's a fun little game to find out a little something more personal about our speakers. The way it works is we put 3 statements. We go speaker by speaker. We put 3 statements on the screen in the chat with information about their personal life, and only one of these statements is true. And the audience, all of you, have to select the one you think is true. So we'll start with Roberta, and we have 3 things about her that are here on the screen, and only one is true. Which one is the true one? Is it that she can dance Brazilian samba? Is it that she often gets mixed up as her daughter's sister? Or has she done high altitude rope walking? Please take a moment to reflect and then to vote. And I will give you some updates of where the votes are going. And then Roberta will reveal which one is the true one. So how are the votes looking?
So far, Brazilian samba is leading.
Okay.
But, high altitude ropes are just behind.
Okay. Good. Give it another 5 seconds. And then, Roberta, you will reveal the truth.
I'm disappointed no one thought I could possibly look like my daughter's sister.
Well, we're not quite done yet, but
Closing the poll, and Brazilian samba won.
so Brazilian samba is what people think is the correct and truthful answer. Roberta, is that true?
It is correct, assuming the bar is very low on the quality. But yes.
Excellent. And can you tell us in a couple of sentences why you have this passion, how you practice, where?
I spent 6 months in Brazil during university, and when I was there, I took the opportunity to do courses, and one of my dreams is to go dance in the Rio de Janeiro Carnival once.
Great. Well, we all hope that dream comes true. Good. Then we move on to Johan. Thanks, Roberta, for these really fun options and for sharing this part of your life hobby with us. So Johan has we also have 3 options here. Only one is true. First one: while working at a harbor when he was younger, he taught a short course on Karl Marx's Das Kapital as part of his harbor's reading club. First option. Second option: he used to be a professional kickboxer. Third option: he lived in Prague for 1 year in 1985 under communist rule as part of an exchange program. Which one is it? 1, 2, or 3? Please vote.
Option 1 and 3 are ahead with 5 votes each. Now option 3 actually has 6 votes, so 46% of the people voted for Prague and under communist rule. Let's give it 5 more seconds and we're closing the poll.
Okay, so I think option 3 is the one that most people think is true. Johan, is that true?
No, it's option 1. Working in the harbor, I was teaching Das Kapital of Marx to laborers in the harbor, yes.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit how that situation evolved and how that teaching worked?
Well, the teaching was, is partly organized by the union, so it's kind of offering. And I was a university student working in the harbor, but also studying and offering help. At first, it happened in my house. So let's say 12 of them or so came to my house. Well, it was a small house, but they were all smoking like hell. And it was very difficult to convince them not to smoke, because it was like they didn't understand me. I said, well, can you please smoke outside? They looked at me like, what's the problem? And continued smoking. So the house was full of smoke. And in the meantime, we were discussing, Karl Marx. So we moved it to an office space after 2 sessions. But no, it was very delightful experience, in fact, too. And perhaps there I already developed what you may call transdisciplinary research. So talking about change in practice.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, for sharing this personal episode with us. Really fascinating. So it's almost 5 p.m. We always want to make sure we end before the full hour. So let me thank Roberta and Johan for the salient answers and for being really fun quiz gamers as well. Thank Vicky for the excellent moderation. Big greetings to you all, and I want to wish you a happy Easter for those who celebrate. We all will gather again on 9 April, so in 2 weeks from now, again 4 p.m. For a podcast on strategic learning. How can we manage the future we can't predict? Sounds a bit like, almost like it has a science fiction element. So I will definitely be there and listen in. It will be moderated by Shel Harkan, and Leonard Kelleher will be our expert. So really looking forward to that. All the very best. Thanks for participating. And we look forward to being in touch after Easter. Have a great break, everyone. Bye-bye.